Blog Talk Radio conversation called The Question with me, Doug Pagitt, your weekday host, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Central, live, brought to you on blogtalkradio.com and streaming over at ustream.tv. This is a conversation we have about the happenings of the day, the big important issues, the silly and the sublime issues as well. It is Thursday, May 7th. We've already talked today about the National Day of Prayer. We've talked about a little boy being returned to his family after his parents' neglect. Now, other issues in the news. Headline, Group pushes for cabinet-level sports post. You see, the president surrounds himself with a collection of people and can organize how he would like and have people in what are called these official cabinet posts that then federal dollars go into, and they can have staff and they can have arrangements and all this stuff can happen. And some group has suggested that what would be helpful, this is the Sports and Society group in Northeast University in Boston, has suggested that there could be an enhanced government role in several important sports goals. It says the United States could encourage more youth participation, increase access for women and the handicapped, and promote healthier lifestyles if they were to even appoint a cabinet-level sports czar. Really? Really? Look, I'm running for the Minnesota State Legislature. I think the government's important. I think that it does a whole lot of crucial things. I mean, today I'm starting to sound like I don't want the government doing anything because I don't want them running the National Day of Prayer, and I don't want them having a sports czar, because here's the point. People already do that. You don't need a sports czar. The reason people don't exercise isn't because someone at the federal government is not saying to them, hey, here are the benefits of exercise. Here's the benefits of cooperative team sports. If you really want to encourage sports, if that's really what we're about, really want greater level of exercise, really want some good sports going on, you really want people being active and involved with each other, well, according to their proposal, they say that most countries already have a minister or secretary of sports. And sports in society, they say that the government could create a secretary of sports and culture and establish a special advisor and increase funding for existing programs. If you really want to do this, you know what you ought to do? Put more money into your public schools so that they can have sports programs that families don't have to spend $700 to $1,000 additional money to have their kids in. So a great idea is to create more funding for your schools so that you could have more physical education teachers, so that you could maybe you could utilize the parks that we have. And if you're in areas that don't have parks, maybe you put the money into the parks. You don't need to pay somebody to be in the cabinet to tell people how important exercise and sports are. If we really think in this country that it's important, then let's help children learn sports, because most adults have the opportunity to be involved in some kind of sport-like activity. Now, look, I know that there's a role that government plays in creating a culture, and it could be that we need the government to help us see something we don't already see, but we live in a sports-rich society. Turn your television on at any point. Look at stadiums being built in arenas. Look at the empty tennis courts. I know some people, I've got friends who would say, if you really want to help, give people a tax cut so they have more money so they don't have to work so hard, and then they can be in sports. And other people would say, if you really want to help people out, you know what you ought to do? You ought to pay for their health insurance so they don't have to work so long so that they can actually be involved in sports. But there's 100 ideas before a sports czar. No more czars, the people are saying in the chat rooms. We're czarred up. I'll tell you, it is a day. Some days the headlines are just full of things that just get inside my head and make me a crazy man. Hey, the FDA is in the news today. The FDA nominee faces tough questions on food safety. There's a serious problem with the safety of our food in this country, and I'll tell you that the natural people, the natural growers, they are all up in arms because they don't like it when alfalfa sprouts and broccoli and everything else is tainted with salmonella, and they say there's a much better way to do this. And the Food and Drug Administration is supposed to be the ones who oversee the process of making sure and certifying that our food is safe in this country. Their job is not to make the food safe, right? Their job is to certify that the food is safe, because the growers, the packagers, the transporters, and the resellers are supposed to make sure the food is safe. And people aren't doing it because they're cheating. Here's the story. President Obama's pick to oversee food and drug safety faces questions today about recent outbreaks of salmonella in food products. Margaret Hamburg, no kidding. Like, if she becomes the nominee, if she becomes the head of the FDA, do you think everyone behind her back is going to call her the Hamburglar? I mean, it's like people who have those doctors with just the perfect last name for their specialty. Well, Margaret Hamburg is scheduled to appear before Senate committee considering her nomination to run the troubled Food and Drug Administration. Now, look, there's some people who are going to go, you know why it's troubled? Because it's the federal administration. There's never anything good about the federal administration. It's bunk. There are good things about them. The agency has suffered a string of food safety failures, including a massive salmonella outbreak in peanut products earlier this year, and tomatoes and peppers in 2008, and spinach in 2006. And every one of those cases you can track back to the people who knew they were selling bad food. She was an assistant secretary under President Bill Clinton, and she's credited with laying the groundwork for the government's bioterrorism and flu pandemic preparations. That's who we want, keeping our tomatoes safe. So, Margaret Hamburg, glad you're on the case. And would you please fix the system that's supposed to guarantee to the rest of us that you can eat a tomato that you buy at the store? Hey, a little more good news out of the natural and government worlds. Climate change may not spur wildfires after all. Article, although rising global temperatures could lead to much drier trees and forests around the world, that may not necessarily translate into increased risk for wildfires, according to a new study in this month's issue of Ecological Monographs. You know, I've always found I could never really trust the ecological monographs. I just think they're hacks over there. They're just a shiv. They're just putting in the word that the man gives them. That's what they do over there at the ecological monographs when they're not publishing studies. Well, this study in the ecological monographs, which we all know, can't trust that, is somewhat contradicted by other recent studies, most of which have identified a link between global warming and the increasing likelihood of wildfires, including studies from the journal Science in 2006, as well as Intergovernmental Panel and Climate Change in 2007. So now there's a big battle between the ecological monographs and Science Journal. This is the kind of insider story you get here on The Question, Blog Talk Radio conversation with me, Doug Pagitt. Weekdays, 10 to 11 a.m. Central Time. We'll leave you on this this little fun note today. It's not all dire news. It's not all killing me. Here's one. Headline. This comes out of Minneapolis. Cops who stopped for gas bust a motorist pulling in with a cooking meth lab in the back. Here's the article. A motorist who pulled into a vehicle in Maple Plain convenience store with a methamphetamine cooking in his vehicle was arrested by an officer who was there getting gas in his squad car. No good for you, meth guy.
90 seconds.
Gotcha. Hey, Blog Talk Radio conversation with me, Doug Pagitt, your host. We'll be back with the second half of the show here in about a minute and a half. We'll be joined by our good friend Carla Barnhill. We will see you then. This is a weekday conversation called The Question on Blog Talk Radio. Conversation with me, Doug Pagitt, your host, weekdays, 10 to 11.